If you've ever finished the IELTS speaking test, walked out of it thinking, wow, that was not too bad, I reckon I did quite well. And then the result comes through and, oh no, the score is not as high as you expected. This video is for you. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name's David and I am your IELTS coach from IELTS Breakthrough. IELTS Breakthrough is a YouTube channel that gives tutorials and tips and strategies to get a high score in IELTS so that you can study at an international university and progress in your career. If you're even thinking about taking an IELTS test, you should subscribe to this channel. So let's get into these 7 mistakes. Now, mistake number 1 is to give answers that are too simple. It's surprisingly common when candidates give answers like this. I don't know. It's interesting. Yes, I like it. Obviously, these are only 3 words, and by saying just 3 words, then you're not going to get the best score. Of course, the fix is to say a lot more in your answer. And I talk about this in other videos, the idea of how to say more. The main thing is to say 2 or 3 things. I call this the rule of 3. And often you can use the why, how, or what to add those 2 or 3 things to what you're going to say. Here is an example for you of a better answer. Imagine that it is the start of your speaking test and the examiner asks you a question, do you like your job? Here is an answer that gives more information, basically. Yes, I like my job because it gives me a lot of independence. And I also get the chance to work with people from different backgrounds. So there's 2 points. Notice that you don't have to give some long, amazing, intelligent answer. Just a couple of simple points will be enough. Now, mistake number 2 refers to your performance in part 2 of the speaking test. You might know that part 2 is where you have to speak for a full 2 minutes. The mistake is to read out the bullet points as they are written to you on the task card. In this part of the test, the examiner will give you a task card that tells you about the topic and gives you some suggestions about what you need to say. And let's look at an example part 2 task here, which I've taken from IELTS.org. The topic is to describe something that you own which is very important to you. And the bullet points are, as you can see, you should say where you got it from, how long you have had it, what you use it for, and explain why it is important to you. The mistake happens when a candidate gives an answer like this. They read the task card and then they say,
I'm going to describe something that I own, which is very important to me. Where I got it from? Well, I got it from my parents. How long I've had it? I've had it for 5 years. What I use it for? I use it for work and communication.
So the question here is how to fix this. And firstly, remember that you cannot read from the bullet points themselves. You have to turn it into a story. Now, this does take a bit of practice, so if you want more tips and tricks on how to deliver a strong part 2, there are plenty of videos in the speaking playlist, so please check those out. However, here is an example of how you can do it better.
I'd like to talk about my laptop, which my parents gave me 5 years ago when I started university. I use it every single day for work, studying, and staying connected with friends. And honestly, I couldn't imagine my life without it.
Now, mistake number 3 is only to give basic factual information as your answer. Let's look at an example to explain this. So imagine that the examiner asks you this question. What preparations are needed before someone goes on holiday? And then the person taking the test says, oh, they must get some money, they must prepare their passport, and they must buy a ticket. Okay, well, that's true. That's an answer, isn't it? But it is only the basic information. If you use your imagination, there's plenty of other things that need to be prepared. You might need to tell friends and family where you are going and leave a contact number. You might need to prepare the security in your house, clean out the fridge of food that is going to go off while you're away, get someone to look after your pet. Who knows? There's plenty of other examples of preparations that you need to, that will not need to, but that you can share. So use your imagination. Now, not only that, it's also a good idea to go beyond the facts. Examiners like it when you give opinions, share feelings, make comparisons, and discuss consequences. So you might add these into your answer. Now, mistake number 4 is when you do not speak for the full 2 minutes. This is a big thing, and I talk about it quite a lot. In fact, there are other videos I've made that go into detail into how to speak for 2 minutes. At this point, understand that in part 2, when the examiner asks you to speak, you should go for that full 2 minutes. Now, you can watch the videos for more details, but the way to do this is to use the WH words: what, why, who, where, when. And also to make sure that you have another one. If you're going to dry up and run out of ideas, you have another one to talk about. It's also important to practice. Make sure that before you do the real test, you really are ready to speak for 2 minutes and you've done it before, so you have that self-confidence that you can speak for the full 2 minutes. Going into the speaking test without any practice is going to be a recipe for failure. Now, mistake number 5 is repeating your ideas 2 or 3 times. Here's an example to show you what I mean. It was very important for me to tell my father the truth. It was very important for me to tell my father the truth, and that's why it was very important to me. Or another example, if they wake up early, they can prepare things well when they wake up early. As you listen to this, I'm sure you can hear that the repetition just doesn't work, does it? Now, the fix here is to think of your point from different angles. The angles could be to explain what happened, contrast what did and did not happen, reflect on the event and how it affected you. One event, you can look at it from a number of different directions and you can discuss it and describe it in different ways. Now, again, using your imagination will help you to get the different angles that you might describe. Mistake number 6 is to not give enough context or background information. And again, this is another tip that applies directly to part 2. And to be frank, part 2 in the speaking test is where candidates lose it quite a lot. The thing is, if you're a listener, you need to understand the situation clearly enough if you're going to listen and pay attention, right? So as a test taker in IELTS, you need to make sure that the examiner knows enough background information to fully understand and picture what you are talking about. Quite often, candidates, when they get that part 2 topic, they don't think to actually tell the examiner about the background information related to the experience that they're going to share. They just go straight into delivering the facts, as I talked about in the other mistake. So here's an example, and we'll use the part 2 task card that I used earlier, and I'll show you this as an example that includes enough background information. If you remember, that topic was to talk about something that is very important to you. And here is the example that shows you, that delivers a bit of background information so that the examiner really knows about the object.
Something that is very important to me is my motorcycle. It is because I need to use it every day to go to work.
I would probably say it's my motorcycle. Public transport in this city is terrible and expensive. What's more, the traffic is awful. If I want to get to work on time, then my motorcycle is essential.
And here's another example. This time the task is to talk about a trip to the countryside. And the point here is it's useful to give the background information about what kind of countryside was visited before you start talking about what you did there and how you felt about this trip and so on.
I went to the countryside with my family a few years ago. We did some camping and we hiked for 3 hours.
I want to talk about a trip to the countryside. We decided to spend a long weekend at a famous nature reserve about 2 hours away from our home. It has some beautiful mountain views and a striking waterfall.
All right, thank you for staying with me so long. We've now reached the final mistake. Mistake number 7. Can you guess what it is? Maybe not. This is about delaying your answer. This happens in some IELTS coaching programs where they teach you these kind of phrases. That's an interesting question. Let me think about it. I've never thought about this before. Give me a minute. Well, in my opinion, these kind of delaying tactics just don't work. And I'm afraid the fact is that you do need to be ready with an answer immediately. The problem with using these phrases is that it's going to be a little bit frustrating for the examiner. The examiner can kind of see these kind of tactics coming, and they want an answer. They want your real English. So delaying your answer doesn't really help your score. Now, there's not an easy fix for this apart from practice and watching all the tips for the speaking test on the speaking playlist of IELTS Breakthrough. But make sure that you do practice and grow your vocabulary so that you can answer without doing these fake delaying strategies. And there we have it. These are 7 mistakes that commonly cause your speaking test score to be less than expected. Let me just review them for you. Mistake number 1, the answers are too simple. Mistake number 2, reading the bullet points in the task card for part 2, reading them out loud. Mistake number 3, only providing the basic factual information without any imagination. Number 4, not speaking for the full 2 minutes. Mistake number 5 is to repeat the same idea 2 or 3 times. Mistake number 6 is not giving enough context or background information that the examiner needs to know. And mistake number 7 is delaying your answers. Remember that a good part of your IELTS score is not just what you say, but how you say it. Now, let me know in the comments, do you have problems with any of these mistakes? And also, tell me if you want any videos on the speaking test. Let me know what kind of topics are going to help you. And of course, remember to subscribe to IELTS Breakthrough YouTube channel so that you get access to all of the videos and tutorials that I put out. In the meantime, have a fantastic week, day, weekend, morning, afternoon, whatever you're doing. I'll see you in the next video.